Um, but hi, everyone. Welcome to another round of the speaker series talks for Next Steps. I'm Ryan Zaccaro. I'm the director of the Next Steps Transition Program at the Ideal School. And today I'm really excited to introduce Arianna Merems, who we had the pleasure of connecting with this year. Arianna is the founder of New Visions Transition Consulting, which provides disability planning, advocacy, support, and guidance for individuals and their families during the transition process to adult life, from school to adult life. Arianna has a legal background, is the proud parent of a young adult with disabilities, and is certified in special education and transition planning. New Visions was created as a result of Arianna's own experiences for families to create a strong transition plan leading to positive outcomes and futures for their children and themselves. So without further ado, I would like to pass it over to Arianna. Arianna, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much, Ryan. And thanks everyone for being here to hear this very important discussion on some transition considerations and for escaping from the heat for a little while, I hope. So as Ryan said, my name is Arianna Merems, and I am the founder of New Visions Transition Consulting. In a nutshell, New Visions helps families of young adults with disabilities to navigate the transition years from school to post-school life by providing planning, roadmaps, troubleshooting, consulting, and really just making the process easier for those families. There's a lot of information out there. There are very few places that pull everything together in one cohesive way. And it's really, really important to just have knowledge of what you need to consider for transition and do whatever you need to do as early as possible. So let me just go to the next slide. So, sorry, hold on one sec. So a little bit about my background. I am the parent of a young adult that has some disabilities. I have been through the special ed and transition system for many, many years, early intervention, CSE, special needs schools, investigating transition programs, and really navigating post-high school experiences. My background is as an attorney. I advocated mainly in court for many years for my clients, and I'm really happy to have taken those advocacy skills and applied them to working with parents and young adults. And the way that I got started with doing New Visions Transition Consulting was when my child was in high school. I found that there were a lot of areas that were not being discussed. And a lot of parents were really overwhelmed with the lack of information that was out there. And so I learned on my own what was important, what needed to be considered, and kind of informally started helping families to plan and to get roadmaps for what they needed to do. And I ultimately went back to school and pursued a master's in special ed and transition. The pandemic kind of slowed things down so that I could continue, formulating the company. And now I'm working with families doing this planning, and it's really meaningful and wonderful to share my knowledge and just help people have a little bit of an easier time. So that being said, before I really touch on the structure of this presentation, I want to make you aware that the future is a really scary time for everyone. Even if you have a child that does not have a challenge or a disability, and I'm aware that some of the parents in Ideal their children do not have IEPs. It's overwhelming out there right now. The economy is a roller coaster. We have huge climate issues going on. There's a lack of affordable housing for anyone. We're in this very strange social media world, which is wonderful, but also extremely challenging to navigate, and who knows what information to trust out there. So, the future is scary for anyone. When you have a child that has any kind of a challenge, a young emerging adult, those challenges and those concerns are manifested because we don't know what they're going to be capable of. So, big challenges and big questions that we are being faced with as parents of young adults right now are things like, where is my child going to live? How are they going to live safely? Who is going to be living with them? How are they going to be able to live and make safe decisions? What are their relationships going to be like? And how are they going to be healthy relationships? Who's going to be there when I'm not here to take care of them anymore? That's a really, really big question. And speaking as someone who is in those, evolving early adult years, that's probably the biggest question that parents of young adults with disabilities and older adults with parents of young adults with disabilities and older adults of disabilities are facing right now, is what's going to happen when I'm not here to help my child? Who's going to make those decisions? Who is going to keep them safe? So the good news is that with transition planning, you're looking at ways that you can stay on top of elements of transition that will help your child be best set up for the future. There are no magic formulas for having a perfect future, but if you can kind of follow and be aware of what the essential elements are in transition planning and do them as early as possible, you're really setting your child up for a good foundation for the future and whatever that might bring. So the way that this presentation is going to flow is there are a lot of areas to cover. I'm going to cover essential areas in the transition process, things that I really feel are the most important for families to be aware of. I'm not going into depth on any of these areas because I've seen in your presentation series, you've had people talking about guardianship and housing and Office of People with Developmental Disabilities. So this is just that's part of this process. But you should know about transition planning in the school and how you can be involved as a family to really have a solid IEP if you have one, or even if you don't have one, to have a solid transition plan for when your child leaves. Understanding family and school roles and how you can both work together and help each other. Understanding government benefits such as OPWDD, which is very overwhelming for many parents who haven't dealt with it before, a little bit about Social Security, and then looking at future planning and what that really means. Guardianship, financial vehicles. There are so many things to think about when you look past high school, and it's really important to understand what they are and be prepared. So I'll talk a little bit about some strategies to make the most of the transition years, a small amount on timelines. I've given some resources which I think are very important. And then just a little bit about a few post-school considerations that I think are facing emerging adults and their families right now, meaning those that are out of school. And then time for Q&A. And if anyone has questions in between, they can shoot a chat over to Ryan and I can answer during, but otherwise you can save them for afterwards. So let's see, next slide. Okay. So essential areas in the transition process. So transition planning in the school is made up of a few different elements. So the first is just understanding that when your child has an IEP, and again, not everyone at Ideal does, the transition IEP is a little bit different than the IEPs you've done before, because the transition IEP, which has to be done by 15 years old in New York State, is the first time that there are something called measurable post-secondary goals. And what the measurable post-secondary goals are goals that are in the areas of education, future education after school, independent living, if applicable, employment, and vocational training. And what you're really supposed to be doing as a school and as a family is working together to take a look at where your child is in terms of their strengths, their preferences, their needs, and their interests, and formulating these goals based around those 4 areas. And when you make those goals and they're in the IEP, the rest of the IEP, the rest of the what's called transition services, which are the people and the organizations in the school or out of the school, parents, community who are involved with the child, who will help the child to work toward those goals. I'm not going to go into a lot more detail about it, but the essential thing to know is that this transition IEP really runs the entire process of the services and supports that your child gets in the school. And if you can really formulate the goals in the transition IEP that are aligned with who your child is, and make sure that the transition services are going to effectively lead to those goals, your child will be, at least school-wise, in a better position when they get out, because they would have achieved these goals that they've already identified as things that they want to do after school. So transition IEPs and the goals in them are based on assessments. And the reason I just want to touch on assessments is that a lot of parents think that assessments are something that they have nothing to do with. Assessments can be very formal. You see them in the IEPs from when your child is in elementary school. And a lot of times they have long names and they're very formulaic and they're being administered by someone in the school or by someone outside of the school. And that's fine. Those are formal assessments. But an assessment is really just a way for you to understand who your child is, what their strengths are, what they need, what their preferences are, and to really get a good idea of how to formulate goals to strive to based on that information. And an assessment can be done by a parent, by a volunteer situation, by a friend. It can really be done by anyone, and it can be based on something as simple as just observing the student, observing the child, seeing what they like, what they don't like, what they like that they struggle with, what do they prefer, and really sharing that information with everyone that's involved in the transition process. Because if the school is seeing the child 6-7 hours a day, and the parents obviously, or the family, are seeing the child the rest of the time, it's very important to compare notes on what you're seeing, because you're seeing the child in two very, very different atmospheres. And you want to take all that information together and then formulate these goals based on what you're seeing. So that's all I'm going to say about assessments. But bottom line is that you should really communicate and take the information that you get from school, from evaluation, from observation, and put it all together to make sure you stay on top of what it is your child's dreams are for the future, where they see themselves, what they want to do, what they want, where they want to live, if they want to go to school. So that's that part of the transition planning in the school. The other part is really making sure that the process is student-centered, which means that the schools and the teachers and the parents should all be speaking to the student often about what their dreams are for the future. Why do they like something? Why do they not like something? Do they really want to work with animals? They seem to shy away from dogs. Maybe there's a different kind of animal they like. Do they really want to work with cars? Maybe there's something else. Do they really want to go to college? Do they understand what the requirements of college are all about and what they want to study? So really focusing on the student and having them involved in the IEP process, having them involved in the assessments, and keeping an open communication is so important. And really just updating and reviewing to make sure that the goals that you're seeing that the student is showing through the assessments are relevant and timely. And most important is, just encouraging your child, your student, to engage in self-advocacy and communication, whether it's at the IEP meeting, whether it's in class, whether it's taking some initiative in the school to be engaged in certain things, because self-advocacy and communication are the foundations of independent living and community involvement. And they're so important, and they really should be, encouraged as much as possible. Family involvement, when it comes to transition planning in the school, many families sit back, we're all overwhelmed, we all have a million things to do, but they just figured that everything is going to be done by the school. And even the school with the best possible intentions cannot do everything. Parent involvement is the #1 indicator of a child's post-school success. And by the way, parent family can be any kind of extended family. It can be someone who's a guardian, it can be a grandparent, it can be an extended family member, whoever is responsible for that child while they're still in school. So parent involvement, the schools should be working around family schedules and making it convenient for them to attend meetings. Again, informal assessments should be encouraged, communication, and there should be, active parent participation in the transition process, which I know Ideal is doing a phenomenal job of because of the presentation series. So important and so unavailable in other schools, really. So, and just to know cultural responsiveness, if a family is not from America, and they have different values or a language barrier. Obviously, that should be addressed as well, and every effort should be made to include the families and make them engage in the process. Interagency collaboration and involvement of community partners. When you have a transition plan in the school, certain organizations, certain agencies should absolutely be invited to attend the IEP meeting and get involved with providing services to the child. Access VR, which is the state VR, a vocational rehabilitation agency, is a very good example of that. And if a school does, if a student does qualify, they should definitely be involved in the transition planning process. Other agencies that might provide employment opportunities should also be invited. Office of People with Developmental Disabilities, which I will get to later, is another, agency that should probably be connected with for those students that might be eligible for their services. So the schools should really be linking with the agencies and support services as much as possible. But parents are a huge source, families are a huge source of community partners. And this is probably the most important thing to take away from this section of planning, is schools can only do so much. And you are out there in the community with your child, where you have friends and you have family members and you have connections to your YMCA, your church, your mosque, your JCC, whatever it is that you do, your social connections. And you can be reaching out to all of your connections to say, hey, my child is going to the Ideal School and they're really interested in learning about pediatrics. Would they be able to intern at your office? Say a student is interested in automotive repair. Does someone know someone who has a garage or works at a car dealership? It's very important to really reach out and look at your connections outside to see who might be available to step in and be involved in the overall transition process. So lastly, in the transition planning area in the school, it really does take a village. Schools, sadly, are really constrained by resources, okay? Time, obviously, even in the best circumstances, your children are only there a certain number of hours a day. Some schools are held to a what I call a standards-driven curriculum, meaning that there's a certain level of testing and core curriculum requirements they have to be responsible for, and they may not have as much time to provide internships in the school or independent living skills in the school. Money, schools may not have enough money to bring in the types of internships and things that they want. Location, if the school, this is not ideal, but if the school is in, say, a suburb or a rural area, they may not be able to offer internships and they may not be able to help students after school because there's no transportation. So transition planning is really a team effort, and strong transition planning in the school, I always say, requires 3 C's, which are communication, cooperation, and creativity between the players. Really getting everyone there, the school, the personnel in the school, the people who know your child best during the day, the family, the outside agencies that may help your child, and those community partners I talked about earlier, and really working together to try to make a really cohesive and solid transition plan in the school for the child. So that is the first essential area. Family and school roles, just briefly again, families should be encouraging the child to speak to the school and teachers and to themselves about where they see themselves in the future and what their goals are. This should be often, ongoing. Parents should be actively involved in the process that's going on at the school and attending conferences and meetings. Schools should certainly make these meetings accessible to parents, make sure the IEP is written well, and involve students as much as possible. And again, just involving community partners and agencies in the process. The next area that's important for those students that are most probably going to get government benefits is understanding the different benefits available. So Social Security is a needs-based program that provides monthly payments to people with disabilities that have limited income and assets. And currently the resource limit for someone that's receiving Social Security is $2,000. What that means is if they show that they have more than $2,000 in their name, the Social Security will be cut and they will ultimately not be eligible for it. People who turn 18 do not have to rely on parental income for their Social Security, so it is not counted. If they have been getting Social Security prior to 18, they have to go through a redetermination process. And I have a list of resources that I will share in the PowerPoint, and you can find out more about how to start that process through those resources. One myth about Social Security is that if you get Social Security, you cannot work. This is absolutely not true, and every effort should be made to have employment goals in the IEP and to have internships. Social Security does have quite a few work incentive programs that allow people to work and still receive Social Security, and I have another link for that for parents who are interested. Medicaid, I'm just going to skip. I'm not really going to speak about Medicaid here right now, other to say that you do need it for OPWDD. So OPWDD is the big government benefits that many people, parents and students who are in middle school and high school and earlier do not know about. So OPWDD, Office of People with Developmental Disabilities. So OPWDD is a statewide agency that offers services to people of all ages with intellectual and developmental disabilities. To be eligible, you have to have one or more of several diagnoses, which I've listed here. I'm not going to read this off, but an intellectual disability, autism, there can be a neurological impairment, and so forth. The disability must be diagnosed before age 22. The disability has to be expected to be permanent, and it has to so seriously affect the person's ability to live an everyday life independently that they would be eligible for OPWDD services. The reason that you have to have Medicaid, which by the way, you will get automatically if you apply for Social Security, is that most OPWDD services are paid for through Medicaid. There are some that are through New York State, but the bulk of them are through Medicaid. And it's something that's called the Home and Community-Based Service Waiver, which you really don't need to worry about here. But if you do apply for OPWDD services and get them, and then choose to do something called self-direction, you will need to have the waiver, the HCBS waiver in place. Essentially, self-direction is a part of OPWDD, which some families want to engage in and some families don't. It puts money into the person's hands figuratively. It's not that you get a check, but there is a budget that is worked out based on the person's needs, and that amount of money is made available for the person to receive supports and services to live the life they want to live in the community they want to live in. And some examples of things that you can do with a self-direction budget are get a housing subsidy to help living in a place that you want to live. Hire a person to help you with your independent living skills. That could be budgeting, transportation, cooking, time management, and so forth. That would be a community habilitation worker. You can get paid, you can pay for classes. Your family can get what's called respite reimbursed, which is basically a break from caring for you. So there's a lot of ability to live an independent life, even if you need supports with the OPWDD budget, and in particular with the self-direction budget, but you do not have to use it if you don't want to. So I have links for OPWDD. I'm happy to answer some more questions about that, but that's kind of the big area that I think a lot of parents have a lot of confusion about. The Access VR is not really a government benefit. It's a state service, but I put it here. Essentially, Access VR is the vocational rehabilitation agency of New York State. And its focus is to assist individuals who have disabilities to get and keep employment and it supports independent living. It trains, it provides reimbursement for education, it gives other education, it strives to foster career development. To be eligible, a person must be over 14, they must have a disability that interferes with getting or keeping a job, and it must be shown that they could really benefit from these services and that they're needed to get, keep, or advance in a job. Are there any questions yet? Because I'm going to jump into the next area if there aren't.
Hi, sorry, I didn't show my picture. This is Jane Providenti. I actually do have a quick question.
Sure.
And it's probably going back a slide or two for the $2,000 limit.
Right.
So I guess, you know, so my son is 20, so he has a savings account, and sometimes he gets money from grandma and papa, and you know the
Right.
drill. And if it goes up to like 2,200, 2,300, and then if I take out 300, you know, to maybe take him to a show or do whatever, like, do they frown upon seeing that he actually has more?
You know, it's really about whether they see that there is $2,000 in his overall resources at one time. Because the thing is, I mean, look, I mean, how closely are they looking at bank accounts? But they do have access to the bank accounts because most people are getting their Social Security, you know, deposited in, and you do have to, you know, apply and give that information. I'm going to actually, the third area down in future planning, I'm actually going to touch on that exact area just to give you some alternatives for what to do with that, because it is so important. And, you know, I've seen families that went over the $2,000 by like $10 and then got penalized and had to pay back like, I don't know, like $800 or something incrementally over the course of, you know, a year. And for nothing, for $10 over, you know, I mean, it's ridiculous. And by the way, $2,000 is not very much to live on. I mean, let's be real, right? I mean, if you want your child to live independently in the community, they have to pay rent, they have to, you know, go out and do things, they have to buy food, maybe they're going to get some, you know, food stamps. But most people are going to need more than $2,000 to live safely with the things that they need. So I'm going to answer your question in a little more detail when I get down to the financial considerations here.
Okay,
so with the future planning, there are a couple pivotal times that you really need to be aware of when you're doing transition planning. The first is just knowing that at 18 years old, this huge transfer of rights occurs from you to your child. So up until your child is 18, you need you're doing everything for them. You're looking out for their health and their safety and their well-being, and you're going to their IEP meetings, and you're navigating systems, and the doctors are speaking to you, and you're making appointments, and you're doing finances, and there's no problem. All of a sudden they turn 18, and at 18, they're assumed to have capacity to make decisions for themselves. And these are decisions that can impact their health, their finances, their safety, and overall well-being. So I've had families that they had to get guardianship because their child wouldn't get on the phone and talk to Social Security, wouldn't get on the phone and talk to the doctor. And they were over 18, and the doctors wouldn't talk to the family because legally they're not allowed to. So you need to really think about much earlier than 18, whether or not you think that your child is going to be able to make good decisions in their best interests when they turn 18. And you can look at the different areas. It can be financial, it can be over the health, it can be you know, educational. There's so many different areas to consider. But if you think they're not going to be able to, then it's really in your best interest to consider the guardianship or guardianship alternatives before they turn 18. It is much easier to get guardianship while your child is still a minor. Now, full guardianship, which is called Article 17A guardianship, really strips the individual of most of their rights. I mean, you're basically just saying they can't make decisions for themselves. And to do that, you file a petition in surrogate's court here in Manhattan, if that's where you live, or in your surrogate's court where you do live. And there are a bunch of papers that you have to do, and you have to meet with the judge. And ultimately, if the judge feels, based on your documents and your doctor's evaluations, that guardianship is warranted, they will grant it. There is a real stress right now to not pursue full guardianship, because the disability community and the disability advocates out there feel that people with disabilities should maintain their rights and they shouldn't give all their decision making away. So there are a lot of other alternatives out there that are hybrids of this. There is supported decision making, where you basically arrange for certain individuals to help your child or young adult make decisions. There are healthcare proxies. You can fill out a power of attorney. There are HIPAA forms that you can fill out if your child is going to be away at college. So there are, or transition programs. So there are a lot of options to guardianship. And some people just get the guardianship and just throw it into a desk drawer, and they feel better knowing that they have it, but they never really use it. It's such a unique set of circumstances that you just need to look into all of the aspects of it and decide what the best thing is to do, and speak to your school and speak to the a psychologist, a doctor, people who know your child, to try to make that decision. But if you are going to do it, it should be done before 18, because there is a real change that happens at that age. The other pivotal time is this change from being in school to leaving school, which basically means that at 21, or at the time that you exit high school, whichever comes first, you are entitled to your services. You're entitled to a free and appropriate public education. You are entitled to related services such as speech or OT or counseling. You are entitled to busing. You are entitled to participate in IEP meetings. When you start looking at adult services, such as OPWDD, Social Security, Medicaid, and a variety of other ones, everything is based on eligibility. It is not, you cannot just walk into OPWDD and say, hey, my child was in a inclusive environment, or had an IEP, or struggles with this, and therefore I want to start OPWDD. It does not work that way. So it's very important to understand that there is this big shift between entitlement and eligibility. And so the biggest way that you can control that, just like guardianship, is really learning early what services your child might need after leaving high school, and really starting the process for those services as early as possible. Because I can say that it's a very slow process. You're dealing with bureaucracies. Thank God they're there, but they're slow. They have delays. There can be interruptions in services, and you really don't want that. So for example, the OPWDD process really does take a long time. I mean, you have to get psychological evaluations. You have to get psychosocial evaluations. You have to go through something called the front door, which I have a link for on the resource slide. And then you have to see if you get in on the first round. You may not, you meaning your child. You may have to reapply. You may have to go to a second level. And then even when you get OPWDD, if you want to do self-direction, that's a whole nother process. So it does take time to do all of this, which is why it's just really important to just learn, even if you don't do anything with the government benefits right now, even if you just get more familiar with what's beyond what I'm talking to you about. If you just go to the lectures, go to the webinars, Social Security, if you go onto their website, they give free webinars on what Social Security is. You can view things about work incentives. OPWDD, there's lots of different webinars out there. Self-direction, again, part of OPWDD. Learn early, take the time now, so that if you think it's something that can really be helpful, you can do it. I can't tell you how many families I know who are trying to get OPWDD services for their children now. And I'm saying high school, 23, 24, and they're just starting now. And their children are out of school, and they don't have any of the supports that they would get through OPWDD, even though it's very likely their child is eligible. So really early planning with that is very important. going on to the financial considerations that we touched on earlier. So, as I said, what if you're getting Social Security or Medicaid, you can only have $2,000 as a resource. And so if you say you're getting checks from grandma, or you're going to be getting a windfall from a personal injury settlement, or life insurance policy, or you're expecting someone to leave money, it's very important to consider those things and to make provisions so that that money is still accessible to the young person, but is not directly in their hands. Because once that money goes into their hands directly, that's it for the government benefits. And if you lose your Medicaid, you lose your OPWDD. So for those people whose children are going to be getting government benefits, it's very important to look at different avenues of how to protect money. So there are a few things that, and this is really for an estate planning attorney, if you really want to get involved in trusts, but a few things you can do. Number one are, when you draft your will, you can do what's called a supplemental needs trust. Supplemental needs trust is something that is included in your will, and instead of money or real property going directly to your child, you can set up a trust that names a trustee, someone who will make sure that these things do go to your child, get used for your child for what they need, but they're not directly in the hands of your child. And that kind of a supplemental needs trust does not take effect until you die. But rather than if you have, say, $500,000 that you think you're going to be able to leave to your child, you do not want to just leave that money to your child in your will if they're getting government benefits. You want to set up a supplemental needs trust in your will so that when your death occurs, which is hopefully a long time from now, it triggers this trust. And then the person who's administering the trust is basically saying, okay, here's this money. The person who passed away wanted to make sure that the money was available for Mary's, education, her housing, her social activities, her needs, and the money is available, but the government benefits are still protected. Another thing you can do, and you can do it now, is to set up a living trust, which is a trust that is in effect right now, that is administered by a trustee, very similar, and any money that your child gets can go into that trust and then be used for their benefit. So they don't have access to the money directly, but it's used for the things that they need. And that's a way to work around this $2,000 resource limit. Another thing that you can do, which is a really wonderful vehicle and is relatively new, and you do not need an attorney for this, is setting up what's called an ABLE account. So an ABLE account, and the link for the ABLE website is on the resource page. An ABLE account is managed by a brokerage house like a Fidelity Investments. It is an account that is for the purposes of the needs of the individual child, but you can administer it for them. They can also administer it when they become of age as well. But it's in the ABLE account because it is specifically to be used for their benefit, and you have to account for what it's being used for if asked. So, for example, an ABLE account can get $16,000 a year right now put into it, okay? That's a total of contributions. It can be from one person, it can be from, 3 people, it can be from many people. When that money is put into the ABLE account, you can draw on it whenever you want to either get cash or to pay an expense. Say your child is going to a transition program, or needs new clothing, or needs a psychiatrist appointment. You can draw from that money, but it's not directly in their bank account. So even though you may need that money because their expenses are more than $2,000, or putting the money in their name would give them that overflow over the $2,000, you can have that money available for them. And it's a wonderful vehicle because you can really say, first of all, there's some stock and some investment benefits of it that I'm not going to get into, but you can take the money that's in the account, and if you're not using it right away, you can invest it in a riskier or more conservative way, and you don't get tapped with the same taxes that you would get if you were a non-disabled individual. You can really save up to about $100,000 in it, I think, right now. Once you reach $100,000, that's where Social Security or Medicaid might start to claw some back. So you don't want it to get that high. But it's really a great vehicle, and it specifically was created because the disability community realized that you can't live in today's world with $2,000, at a time. I mean, if your rent is $1,800 a month and you have other expenses, how are you supposed to function and pay your costs if you're not allowed to have that much money in your account at one time? So the ABLE account is a great vehicle for really having more than $2,000 available at one time. So, for example, the question that was asked earlier about having a few checks that are, making the resource amount more than $2,000, a couple $100 I wouldn't worry about so much. But let's just say grandma gave, Sam $1,000 graduation check, right? If you have the ABLE account, you can put it in there and you can still pull it to use it for pretty much anything. I mean, the only people that are really checking into what you might use the ABLE funds for would be if you didn't account for what it was being used for and the IRS had any questions. Social Security and Medicaid really don't question it because it is a legitimate financial vehicle. Okay, so with future planning, the other part of what I suggest, which I think is really important, is doing what I call a life planning file. And this is something that I often create for clients. And it's taking formal documents that you have, whether it's the IEP, OPWDD eligibility letters, guardianship documents, powers of attorney, history of volunteer and work experience, obviously very important contacts such as doctors and school personnel, people who might be involved as contacts if you're getting adult services or getting government benefits, list of medications, and putting it into a really well organized folder. And most importantly, including in that file an overview of the child in your own words, something that can be videoed or you can write it, but something that really goes beyond what's on paper, but talks about who your child is as a person, what makes them tick, what are the keys to really getting through to them, what are their idiosyncrasies, something that if you weren't around, you would want someone to pick up and have as close to an understanding of who that child is as you do. And it's just a really important vehicle. We all think we're going to be here, but you just never know in life. And so I really encourage people to put that together or to get someone to do it for them and to update it, frequently, so that if anything happened, someone would be there who could, read your words and understand it. And even if nothing happens to you, just to have an organized file system for these documents is really important, and it'll make your life easier. So going on to the next slide. So strategies, I'm just going to, very, very quickly, things to do with your child during transition, talking to them frequently, really looking into what their interests and their challenges and their strengths are, encouraging them to expand their interests, always discuss the future with them, listen carefully, listen to what they like and don't like, find opportunities for your child to practice independent living skills, community and volunteer opportunities for your child. Never assume that you can't find something for your child to pursue that could lead to a career. I mean, one of my favorite stories about working with disabilities was a young woman who had some severe disabilities and was, in her 20s, and she was working with an agency, and they were trying to find out what could she possibly do, because work is so important, right? I mean, it's not just about making money, it's about structure and self-worth and community and making friends. And it's so essential for all of us to have that structure and the elements that come with work. And so they were thinking and thinking. And so finally they were like, well, she really can't work in this store. She can't do this. What does she like? And they went back and they went back. And finally, the people that had been working with her for a long time said, well, she really has always liked stacking things. She was on the spectrum. She likes those little Russian dolls. She likes the boxes. She likes putting the small thing into the bigger thing, into the bigger thing. And someone said, what about vending machines? So this, with supports, they came up with this great idea, which was let her get a loan. They helped her to buy some vending machines and to supply them to various office buildings. And this girl with significant disabilities was able to start a small business providing vending items to these different buildings with the help of her supports. Okay. I mean, she couldn't do everything, but they really looked beyond what was right in front of them and really looked more carefully, okay, she struggles with this, but what does she like? What does she like to do? And that's just so important when you're thinking about the future for your children, is to really, say, how can we link something that they just enjoy doing with something that could lead to productivity? And so, so that was, I just like that story. So, and I went over things to do with your child's school. So it's listed here, and I'm not going to go over that again because I want to have time for questions. Outside the school, I encourage all of you to join parent networking groups. Facebook has great groups out there. Educate yourself, what you're doing now, because you're here, about your child's rights in the transition process. Go to the presentations that Ideal is giving. Get onto the OPWDD website, educate yourself about what's available. Students, learn about your disability, embrace it. Don't be ashamed of it. It's just a different way of learning, and it's a different way of thinking. That's all it is. Make sure that students express, their strengths, learn how to advocate for themselves. They should be challenged to take on new responsibilities, make good choices, learn how to accept constructive criticism. That's a big one. All of that connects into successful foundation for transition. Timelines, there's the factors of what each individual student needs are too varied for me to really go into detail here. There are different approaches for different ages. And I'm happy to, elaborate at a future time about things that you might want to, explore and keep track of. But I've kind of hit the major things here that I think you need to be aware of. And, age 18 to age 21, we talked about before age 18, definitely looking about the decision-making and the guardianship, and certainly about government benefits. Age 18 to 21, that's a really crucial time, even if your child is, say, in a next steps program or a transition program, to really think, is my child going to be applying for adult services? What's going to come next? And really make sure that that's set up. And also, if your child is applying to college or vocational school, make sure that you're taking the steps early to explore different programs the year before you have to. If, they're getting out of Ideal at age 21, go explore some programs when they're 19. Who cares? Get some ideas and then go back. Speak to other parents, go on to, Instagram or Facebook, just get information to make sure that program is a good match for your child. Resources are here. I'm going to make this PowerPoint available. So here I just gave you Social Security Administration. This red book is the guide to the work incentives. It's really good because many of you probably aren't quite up to this, but it really is important to understand that Social Security does not interfere with working. OPWDD, main website, important. Self-direction, should definitely learn about. It's not for everyone, takes work, but it's a great vehicle. The front door is the first step you have to take if you're applying for OPWDD. So this is a link to that. It's basically, I think it's still a webinar, but you go on for about an hour and a half, 2 hours. You learn all about OPWD, self-direction, and you get a certificate. And that certificate is one of the requirements for actually applying. So you didn't need to do it, but you could actually go into the front door and just sit in on it anyway, just to get a feel for what it's about. Access VR, again, the link is here. Job Path is supported employment service for people with disabilities. The link for ABLE I mentioned. I really encourage you to investigate it. It's a wonderful resource. You don't need an attorney to set it up. You just call a Fidelity or whatever other brokerage house does it and get it set up. Think College is an amazing resource. They list, if you go into college search, they will go state by state and they will list the various transition programs and colleges that are available for transitioning young adults. And I think they have about 23 of them for New York, and it's a really, really great resource to explore. CUNY also has a lot of different programs, whether it's just getting services from an Office of Accommodations or whether it's getting a more intensive educational training. They have programs for people who get degrees and not degrees. Best Buddies is just a nice resource for maybe getting your child out into the community with a peer mentor. New York State Independent Living Council is a great place for connecting with other people who are disabled, if that is your situation, and just learning about the resources that are out there. They can really help you with pretty much anything, and there are local chapters. And then this is the New York Housing Resource Center for people with developmental and intellectual disabilities. So this is a great resource for just finding out what people are doing with housing. They have all kinds of trainings and brochures and information, and housing is a really, really big area for young adults who are out of school, out of transition programs, really going on to next steps and trying to find out where they can live affordably and safely. And so I really stress that they're a wonderful organization. And just quickly, because I do want to leave some time, right now, as the parent of a young adult who is in her early 20s, so post-school transition considerations, when you're out of high school, either right after high school or even out of a transition program like Next Steps, you have to think about what level of support your child is going to need and what they want to do, and try to merge those two things to find the good program that's going to support them and give them those skills they need for independent life. So Think College, that's one of the reasons that I gave the link to that, because they are very good. But when you're looking at post-high school programs, either colleges or transition programs, you're really looking at kind of three different areas depending on your child. Any college is going to have an Office of Accommodations. And as long as your child discloses their disability, they can get some support. It's not an intensive amount of support, but maybe a scribe or some extra time for testing, things like that. Then there are kind of middle level programs where a child could still go to college, but could have a third-party agency that works with that college to provide a little more support than Office of Accommodations, but not as much support as a actual post-high school transition program. So an example of that would be like in Adelphi on Long Island, or there's a place, Career Next at Cobleskill, and I think these are both listed in the Think Ahead website. But they basically allow you to attend college and get a degree, bachelor's or associates, but there's a third-party agency there that is there to give added support, to give you a peer mentor, to help you with homework, to be on campus, to really give those added supports, to address issues that might come up in dormitory living and that kind of thing. So usually with those programs, there's a little bit more of a fee, but that's nice middle ground. And then there are transition programs. So, transition programs are wonderful because so many students aren't ready for independent living when they get out of high school. I know Ideal does a lot of independent living skills in their program, which is great. You can maybe want to go to college, but need to learn how to live by yourself. You may need to learn how to cook. You may need to learn how to navigate transportation. So there are transition programs like Next Steps, which are at Ideal and are the next step in terms of giving you help with vocational skills and independent living skills. There are residential transition programs where a student can have a college experience and maybe even live in the dorm, but they're getting also those independent living, human relationship classes, maybe a little bit of an internship, et cetera. there are programs out there that are really geared toward not really college, but just independent living and vocational skills. And so, that depends on your child, but that's one area to explore. Skipping down to housing, I'm just going to say quickly, I really stress that you learn about housing and hop onto that website that I gave earlier, because housing is such a big option. There's a lot of exciting stuff happening right now about doing integrated housing and inclusive housing that mixes people with disabilities with older senior adults and with maybe people who need affordable housing, and trying to combine resources. There are places that are matching young adults with seniors. I mean, there's a lot going on. There's a lot of affordable housing that's being created, and that is the place to learn about it. And then finally, just to the last question, the last issue, which is who's going to be there when I'm gone. So that is really the biggest concern of any parent of either a young person with challenges or an older person with challenges, is what's going to happen when I'm not around anymore. Not everyone has, brothers and sisters, or brothers and sisters who want to step in. Not everyone has a lot of aunts and uncles. There is not always a situation where there are other family members there. And so it's very important that to prepare for life after high school, and this is continual, to keep expanding the circle of support. Keep bringing in people as your child gets older who get to know your child and can help them in work, in community involvement, in school. And those people, once they develop a relationship with your child, should continue to bring in new people, so that there's always someone there who can kind of be looking out for your child. And that's really the biggest answer. There's no magic wand that says there's going to be someone out there that can, there are some agencies out there that are trying to create long-term supports. That's true. But what you can do as a parent is just keep expanding that circle of support, so that there's always someone there to help your child. And then the last thing I'll say is just be open to change. Everyone wants to know exactly where their child's going to be, what they're going to be doing, how they're going to be living, who they're going to be with. And if any of us think about where we were in our early 20s through mid 30s, think about how many jobs you changed, maybe careers you changed, how many different places you lived, how many different relationships you were in. It's not any different for children with challenges. And so you just have to be mindful of that. It's really the ultimate in mindfulness, is just being aware that when things are good, they're good, but always keep yourself open to more opportunities. And that's it. I think if you just address and keep in mind all these different transition considerations, you'll really be that much more ahead of the game when your child is out of school, out of a transition program, and really trying to navigate, this whole area of post-school living. Well, thank you.
Thank you so much, Arianna. There's a couple questions in the chat. We don't have too much time, but maybe we can take a few minutes to go through these. And I think the first one you pretty much touched on. It says, I'm interested in an after high school on-campus experience for my son. Don't know if it'll be college. Are there other options, trades, etc.?
Right, there are. I mean, that's the thing, is that, and I really encourage you to go into Think Ahead and look, because a lot of the programs, when you go in, there's a tab that allows you to search for, I don't know if it's called programs or colleges, but it will list programs that are available that are not necessarily college programs. So that's one thing. If your child is getting Access VR, that's also another way to get some supports. So at least in the employment area, to maybe get internships and employment exposure, and be aware of what might be out there. So yeah, you don't necessarily have to. Is that the question, where they could go and actually live?
Yes.
Yeah. So not the transition programs, by their very nature, are not necessarily going to be to go to college. Like I said earlier, some of them are really much more geared toward getting out there and getting the skills to be able to work and be able to live independently, and they can be residential.
Thank you. Teresa asked, do you have resources to learn more about the aforementioned college supports for disabled students, especially the physically disabled?
Well, I mean, I think the two resources I would say to start with are the Think Ahead and also the CUNY system, which is a very, very strong system and really, addresses all levels of disability. The other place that I would really strongly suggest that you look is the Centers for Independent Living, which I gave in that resource slide. And I think if you go in there, you'll be able to find your local one. And those Centers for Independent Living are run by people with disabilities only. And they are really familiar with, the exact programs and services that might be available for specific situations.
Great. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Any other questions? Well, I'm really, look, I'm just very happy to share this knowledge. I know it's daunting. I wish that when my daughter was in her school, someone had been presenting like this, just to give an overview. There's so many different services and supports. And as you know, because you have had different presenters covering these different areas, I mean, they're all very specific, right? So, someone's going to be an expert in housing, but might not know very much about Office of People with Developmental Disabilities. Someone might be an expert in guardianship or in, creating these trusts. So you really have to just kind of pick and choose and work within your resource amount as well. So not everyone can afford, a big fancy elder law attorney to draft up a trust, but there are options. And if you just look at your resources and network with other parents, there's usually an answer for what you're looking for. Someone has addressed the issue before. And so I think you just have to really, it's all about education, doing it early, and really taking the time now. Don't wait. I mean, it breaks my heart that OPWDD does not take a more active stance in pushing into, schools earlier on, because so many people I know would have benefited from getting those services when their child was 5, 10, 12. It could make all the difference, because as parents, we're exhausted. We're exhausted. We're dealing with our own lives, and we have the challenges of having, young children, and forget about disabilities. I mean, if you can navigate this landscape of, social media and drug use and alcoholism and identity, and with, there's so many things that emerging adults are dealing with right now, and the families of those adults are dealing with. So it's overwhelming, but you're really doing yourself a favor to just commit to learn early and to tap into whatever it is that you think is going to be helpful, because you'll just be in such a better place than trying to pull it all together last minute. So much of this stuff cannot be done quickly. And the last thing you want is for your child to get out of a great high school or transition program where they've gotten skills and then end up just sitting on your couch, graduating to your couch. I mean, that's the worst, the worst possible thing for the child or emerging adult. And it's awful for the family too. So yeah, I think you just have to take every step to avoid that. Well, if anyone has any questions, my information is there. You can feel free to email me. I hope that you got some knowledge from this webinar. I know it's a lot to cover. I was really trying to keep it short, and I couldn't really delve into everything in depth, or it would have been here till tomorrow at this time. But just keep listening, keep learning.
Thank you so much, Arianna. That was so helpful. We're so grateful
I'm
to
so
have had you
glad.
with us.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you for being here. And families, thank you as well.
Thank you so much, everyone.
We can
Have a wonderful evening.
do.
Bye.